Welcome to the Vision Hunters Podcast. This is episode number 4, The Transformative Business of Rehabilitating Aggressive Dogs with Matt Beisner. Matt believes that dogs come into our lives to teach us very specific lessons, and he should know. He needed plenty of them just to stay alive. Beisner, once the worst kept secret in Los Angeles by dog lovers and dog rescuers, is the founder of the ZEN DOG. He currently stars in Nat Geo Wild's Dog Impossible. Beisner's training methods are like no other. Without the use of fear, force, food, commands, or control, Matt delivers results that are nothing short of miraculous. Through his work, Beisner shares his deeply personal journey of recovery, finding redemption, and purpose in dealing every day with the two things he feared most, himself and dogs. Through these life changes, Beisner came to understand that every relationship, especially that which you have with your dog, only works if it's based on respect, trust, and love. Beisner gets to practice this daily with his wife and partner, Brooklyn, their 4-year-old son, their 8-month-old daughter, and their 4 remarkable dogs that bless their home. In this episode, you will hear Matt's evolution from dog trainer to dog behavioral specialist, how Matt built the ZEN DOG, a boarding facility in Los Angeles dedicated to rehabilitating aggressive dogs, landing the docu-series Dog Impossible on Nat Geo and Disney+, how preparation meets opportunity sometimes unknowingly, facing fears out of necessity, assertive dog training methods versus modern day dog training, how humans can help dogs help other dogs, creating a legacy based on teaching the next generation rather than ego, the principles of vision and prosperity, how dog socialization can unlock desired behaviors, codependent relationships between dogs and their owners, and much, much more. Please remember to subscribe, like, leave a review, and share the show with your friends and family. You can also check out new episodes every Wednesday at 7 a.m. on Spotify. And if you want to watch the episodes, you can check them out on YouTube at my Cody Story YouTube channel. That's CODYSTOREY. Now let's get into episode number 4 with Matt Beisner. So I'd like to first start by saying thanks for taking the time to meet with me today. And also I want to say thank you again for allowing me the honor to come work for you at the ZEN DOG in downtown Los Angeles a few months back. I must say it was a profound experience.
It was so great for me to have you there and to be able to work with you. And, we already had a different working relationship, before that, and, a different personal relationship before that. And so I have thought often about how immediately you impacted the culture and the business at our facility, and which I knew was, that's consistent with how I knew you. And it was just a testament to who you are to see somebody who really knew next to nothing about this, and to drop them in and see what happens when somebody with your kind of awareness and humility and incredible attention to detail, self-awareness, comportment, and integrity comes into something that is built for that. It's actually built for people like you, who think the way that you do, who learn the way that you do, who want to serve the way that you do. And that was just rad. It was just a rad, it was great for the company. It was just a rad personal experiment and experience to see how it went down,
Oh, I loved it, man. I learned so much, and it was a real pleasure just being able to work side by side with you.
Yeah, thank you.
Could you share with us what life was like pre-ZEN DOG and pre-TV show Dog Impossible?
Pre-ZEN DOG goes back about more than a decade now. So what life was like then, I was still pretty new, maybe in the first couple of years of being clean and sober, and by all accounts, a well-intentioned hot mess. So, that takes a lot of cleaning up. The old analogy that you drive in the car and you stop the car and all the shit from the trunk comes back and hits you in the back of the head, and you clean that out, and then you got to clean out the back seat and then the engine, and then you got to get a new car. And, so I was like way down in the beginning of that path, not to judge it, but that's just where I was. And I was afraid of dogs. That's the thing that's radical. I was afraid of dogs as a grown man up until maybe about 12 12 years ago, I think, is when I started. And maybe I got my Vista printed up cards of that said the Zen Dog, Matt Beisner on it, maybe like 11 years ago when I was starting to
Mm.
just get some establishment. And it's funny because I look back now, I had made a list early on in my sobriety of things that I wanted to do. And I wrote on there to be a dog trainer. And I'm not sure, like I just let myself write. Speaking of vision, one of the
Mm-hmm.
ways that I work visions is I just let myself write. It's one of the few places I can really operate without judgment
Mm-hmm.
and observe what actually is happening. And what's coming out of me. And I was really surprised that I wrote that down. I never wanted to wear ties again unless it was for fashion. Like I had a slew of things that were clear that were going to be part of what a visionable life would be.
Uh-huh.
And so it's strange to me that I wrote that down, given that I was afraid of dogs that cross the street, see a dog cross the street afraid.
Mm-hmm.
And it was starting to unfold. And then pre-TV show, we had taken this idea. My wife and I, Brooklyn, I founded the company and then she built it up with me. And we'd taken an idea that's really started in our home with a few dogs, and it ended up being 22 dogs with 22 crates in our home. And we cleared out the the furniture, and it was a particular kind of madness, but there was something magical about that. And when we opened the facility about 6 years ago, which is currently shut down due to the COVID lockdowns,
Mm-hmm.
when we opened the facility, we saw that madness actually take hold, that magical madness take hold. And we saw people come in and work with it and buy in and do exceptional things. And it's been an incredible learning process. And then we get up to a place where I've got celebrity clients and all that stuff that sometimes happens here in LA if you do something well, or you connect with the right person. I've never actively looked for that, and we stay on the down low with who our clients are.
Mm-hmm.
We had one client that said, Lena Dunham, she's public about it. She said, my dog Lammy was at the Zen Dog, and it changed his life. And like, that was it. When
Mm.
she said that, I remember her sending
Wow.
me a text or an email saying, I want to give you a heads up that I just outed you on Jimmy Kimmel or something. It was
Wow. That's
something
big.
like that. I mean, it
Yeah.
was, or on her Instagram page. And within 2 hours, I was getting calls from people about doing a show.
Dang.
So I don't think that I thought we were ready, but I actually was not surprised in that I had the idea, and it had been in conversation, being able to do a show, an unscripted, a docu-series style show about
Mm-hmm.
what we do. And that had been in my mind and floating around in conversations with people for probably about, I don't know, maybe 7 years ago, maybe like 3 or 4 years prior to Lena, Lena Dunham making her announcement. So,
Mm-hmm.
um, so that's really that's a rough sketch history of how things were at when we got there. And then when we got there, I was faced with a really important question, and that was, how does this serve the vision? Because the primary purpose is to be of service, and how I be of service then really shapes um, the vision, and it is a reflection of if I'm true to the vision.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Um, so when the show came up, it was there was a lot of internal conflict. I went to a lot of my mentors. I had to do a lot of my own spiritual work and bring it into my meditation and seek counsel on it and check myself, because I had come from a place where all I wanted was to be recognized.
Mm-hmm.
Certainly
Yeah.
prior to me getting clean and sober. Like, I remember saying to a buddy of mine, I want to play Madison Square Garden in New York, and I want to sell it out 5 nights in a row. That would probably make me feel even.
Mm. Yeah.
With my ego deficit.
Uh,
And then the guy said, well, what happens on the 6th night? And I was like, oh, I didn't
mm-hmm.
think about the 6th night,
Yeah.
So I had, and I had played music, and I had worked, here and there as an actor. And so I really had to check what my motives were.
Mm-hmm.
And interestingly enough, the first day we started filming, I realized I was in my sweet spot. Like, I took what I could do with dogs, and I took service as my primary purpose. And then I took my years of experience in being in public, and it all just came together. Nothing got wasted. And that's the thing
Mm.
about about a vision, as I'm thinking about this out loud,
Mm-hmm.
nothing will get wasted,
Mm-hmm.
you know?
So everything that you had experienced prior to was really able to help. It really helped you actually come through
Yeah.
in the
Yep.
service realm, because you had already done these different things that was maybe unbeknownst to you, preparing you for this moment in time.
Yeah. Yeah. Clearly, like a mentor of mine said years ago, if you look back on your life, you'll see that it's a straight line, but you've
Mm.
got to get enough distance to be able to
Mm.
see that. Because when you're in
Yeah,
it, A,
it
it
was like a
doesn't
little
make
bit like a
sense,
roller coaster.
right?
Yeah.
Especially lately. Yeah.
Hmm. Okay, so you mentioned like, how do you go from being afraid of something, right? Afraid of dogs, and there's this high level of fear,
Mhm.
um, to investigating this whole world of dog training, and then go from dog trainer to dog behavior specialist. Like, what
Mhm.
was that progression? Because I know in my life, it's important for me to actually become aware of the fears that are taking place inside of me, and those actually have started to become my guide. Like right now, my mantra is do scary shit, including make a
Mhm.
podcast and have conversations on Zoom.
Right.
Right, it's like, what are those things that I'm afraid of or that intimidate me, that there's this fear and I know it's there, and it's
Yeah.
like, although the fear is there, there's something inside of me that draws me to it, because it
Right.
makes me feel alive. Like, is that
Right.
what was going on with you? What drove you to want to get involved with a fear and then turn it into what I now know as being a dog behavior specialist?
That's an interesting way to frame the question. The way it started literally was early on in my recovery, like 4 months, where I was detoxing still. I moved in with a woman who I was living off. We were living together, and I was living off her,
Mm-hmm.
as I did.
Mm-hmm.
And she had a little black terrier named Kingston, who's featured in Dog Impossible. And Kingston had recently been adopted by her and was aggressive. So she would go to work. I would stay home because I couldn't work, and Kingston would attack me. that's that's how it started.
Mm-hmm.
So out of necessity, I realized I've got to do something because this is the deal. I'm
Mm-hmm.
here. And what I didn't know until I think years later was I started to see how I could help Kingston. Um, and whether the motive was selfish or the motive was pure, kind of doesn't matter. That's the thing about a vision where it doesn't waste anything. Whatever the motives were,
Mm-hmm.
I started to help him. So literally, I didn't leave the house. But Kingston needed to get outside when she was at work. So now I started to leave the house. But Kingston needed help getting outside because he was afraid, and 90% of aggression is fear-based, which I can certainly relate to.
Mm-hmm.
And that's how, really, I mean, that was the first pebble in the water that became the Zen dog. I I made my relationship with Kingston about trying to help him, and I actually benefited from it. And then the
Mm-hmm.
reward for that was my then girlfriend said, "Well, can you help my friend's aggressive dog?" And
Mm, yeah.
my friends of friends and that kind of thing,
Mm-hmm.
So facing the fear, so it really was born out of fear,
Mm-hmm.
fear and necessity. And I think too, probably like you, it wasn't okay for me to just stay there and be afraid. I could have
Mm-hmm.
ostensibly not taken him out. I could have let him poop all over the house. I could have done nothing for him,
Yeah.
but I wouldn't have been able really to live with myself,
Mm-hmm.
you
The
know?
alternative's price was too high.
Yeah. Yep. Yep. And then that path just became, like I said, the reward for it was I got dogs that were scarier and scarier. And, as I continue to grow in my accountability and my desire to be in integrity, I had to change the way that I was working so that I wasn't working from a place that was dominant and um, purporting to be an alpha and being physical and things that one could easily do from a place of fear.
Mm-hmm.
You know, I had to stop using the dogs to prove that I was a big man. You know,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
and so that required it. That did and had and continues to require a profound evolution.
Can
Um,
you explain that evolution? Because I want to pin down this as well, that dog
yeah.
trainer versus dog behavioral specialist.
Right. So, anybody could be a dog trainer. I mean, anybody could say that they're a dog trainer. Let's put it that way. Anybody
Mm-hmm.
could say that they're a dog trainer. where we start to move into behavior specialty, first of all, there has to be uh, countless number of hours in observation and in practice,
Mm-hmm.
um, in conjunction with at least a rudimentary scientific understanding.
Mm-hmm.
And as I wanted to get better, I needed to go to places where people were doing things that I didn't know how to do, or where they knew things that I didn't understand, and when I went, it would unlock things for me that became pillars for what I was going to end up building. And
Mm-hmm.
what we do now, as you know, we're able to rehabilitate some of the most dangerous dogs in the country that I've seen,
Mm-hmm.
and without fear, force, food, commands, or control.
Mm-hmm.
So the evolution of that was, how do I do this better, and how do I as a person get better? And that's really, it just kind of kept rolling that way. And every time I'd come up short, it was clear to me that I had to grow. That's still happening right now.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Which I think, makes an amazing craftsman. The ones who continue to be a student, although
Hmm.
they are also a teacher.
Yeah.
So can you share a little bit more about this journey, how you've gone on to hone your craft, like the process of learning,
Hmm.
what it is that you do as well? Because I know you function at a very high level of craftsmanship right now. I mean, I was able to be around it personally. And then have you gone through like different methods and teachers, and what have some of
Sure.
these other discoveries been?
Well, I think that there are basically three or four big steps in the process. The first was what was then really popular at the time, 12, 13 years ago, which is what would be categorized as aversive methods. So I'm gonna show that I'm the alpha. I'm gonna be dominant,
Mm-hmm.
um, physical, and it left room for a lot of risk for how the human might harmfully interact with the dog.
Mm-hmm.
And it could change behavior, but that didn't mean that the behavior was changed sustainably, and it didn't mean that the dog would actually choose it except out of fear.
Mm-hmm.
And frankly, nor did it mean that the human would actually feel good about it. That was part of it for me. I was
Mm-hmm.
doing it and it worked, but it just wasn't right. It wasn't right for the dog. It wasn't right for me. I
Mm-hmm.
began to so I'd go to the local shelter, and the few times that I would go and not come home with a dog, I'd be hanging around and asking questions of one of the volunteers there. She wasn't even a trainer, but to this day, I'll call her and ask for her thoughts on something.
Wow.
She's one of these people she's just so brilliant with animals, and her scope and the scope of her experience and her understanding. So I just kept picking brains of people who had what I wanted, you know,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
and applying it and going back and applying it. And then I started to hear, open myself up to higher education. And I started to hear the names of people, Dr. Ian Dunbar and Ken McCourt and Nicole Wild. And those were some of the early people that I heard about. Paul Owens, who's out here in LA, and checking into what they were doing, going to seminars and attending conferences and things like that, and getting education that would, and actually talking to these people directly and saying, here's what I'm doing. Like Dr. Ian Dunbar, if your listeners can look him up, he's, he is one of the forebears of modern day dog training. He's probably 5 decades into it. I believe he's since retired, but just, he's at the top of the game and understanding in the business as a trainer, as
Mm-hmm.
a vet, as a doctor. And so when I saw him, I've seen him on a few occasions, I would say, what about this? And what about this? And what about this? And I just asked these questions of these masters outright because I wanted to know what was working. And it was really helpful and valuable to get the feedback from them. And I don't know that I ever experienced it. This is actually, I'm thinking about this now, maybe for the first time. I don't know that I ever experienced the feedback as positive or negative, as negative. They just seemed to be so generous
Mm-hmm.
in what they were giving. I have a working relationship right now with a man named Mike Shikashio, who is a world-renowned specialist in dog aggression,
Mm-hmm.
and he holds degrees that less than 200 people on the planet hold.
Wow.
And we shoot texts back and forth because I've got questions for him and he's got information, and so there's a generosity of spirit too that was consistent with the people that I kept going to. I think I'm realizing that right now. And that's
Mm-hmm.
necessary for a vision, because if I am to carry the vision and I am not generous in spirit, then what I do is I hoard what's good.
Mm-hmm.
And that will go rotten. That'll get rotten pretty quickly. So it's gone that way. And then, and I knew we were onto something. And then when I brought in staff, when we opened the facility and I brought in staff and I could see it working, not always, because I needed to
Mm-hmm.
do better, because it wasn't right for people, that the people weren't right for it. But I
Mm-hmm.
could see that it was working. And when we got to a place where we'd have 50 dogs a day in there, and, at
Which is
least
a
half
lot
of
of
these,
dogs to work
which is
with.
a lot of dogs, yeah.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And half of those dogs had bites on their history, and at least 40% of those dogs had never been socialized, had been kicked out of other daycares. And we were doing it without fear, force, food, commands, or control. And we were seeing the results regularly. One of our mantras there was miracles daily. And it became
Yeah.
clear that we were moving into rare air, you know.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and I hope that answers your question, because the journey fascinates me as well.
Mm-hmm.
And so I
No,
don't
I'm
want to
always
keep.
interested to hear it because I always try to look inside and see, what it's been like for me through my
Mm,
evolution, especially with my last craft. And I notice a lot of commonalities and a lot of similarities when I talk to other people who are functioning at a high level, no
right.
matter what the craft is. Like you were saying, you were able to ask for help. You were very inquisitive, and there was this generous sharing going both ways,
Right.
and I know even in teacher mode, when people ask questions, I'm actually being given too, because it
Right.
keeps that fire burning and it allows me to
Yeah.
go deeper and rethink things and, let go of certain concepts or ideas or beliefs that I had just because they're asking questions. And it kind of forces me into that student mode, even though I
Mm,
might be in teacher mode. And
yeah.
I notice a lot of those commonalities with people, like I was saying, that are really great at what they do.
It's a great example that a lot of people, as a result of that season one and the exposure. I mean, Nat Geo got bought by Disney. Talk about like
Mm-hmm.
the way things lined up. All of that's out of my power.
Mm-hmm.
Nat Geo got bought by Disney, and Disney said, we're going to put this on this new streaming channel we have called Disney Plus, and you're going to be in
Mm-hmm.
18 countries, and like all of that was wild. So to have a, an ongoing number of trainers or people that run rescues or people that work at shelters reach out to me and say, or like I got an email the other day, my son is 14 and he wants to study, or my daughter is 10. To have those kinds of inquiries and responses from people was really kind of staggering. And to your point, because they're asking to be taught, and mind you, I did go to the people that I respect, the ones that I consider at the highest level, and say, what do you think about this? And they were overwhelmingly positive. Absolutely,
Mm-hmm.
absolutely, you should teach.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and because they're asking, it put me on notice about what I do and what I don't want to do and what I want to teach, and really what's generative. One of the things that I learned along the way, four hallmarks from some deep men's work that I've done, hallmarks of the mature masculine: um, compassion, sense of purpose, vision, and generativity.
Mm-hmm.
And is what I'm teaching able to be taught to the next generation? And
Mm-hmm.
that's where legacy lives, and not so much as an ego trip for me. I try to stay away from that, but
Yeah,
but
with the
that's
legacy.
what
Yeah.
I'm looking at now. That's the responsibility that actually became clear to me with this show.
So it's not a selfish, egotistical legacy. It's a legacy in which the message or what you bring to the world can continue to help others when you're gone.
Correct. Yeah, to the extent that this
Still
is
service
useful
based.
in the world. Yep. Yep.
Okay.
How can I hone it? And so that's where I'm at now. And so somebody reaching out saying, will you teach me? That puts me on notice in a different way that is scary and exciting.
I really like that perspective of legacy. I've never heard that before. If I had like
Mhm.
a button to push and a bomb went off, that was a bomb right there. For anybody listening, man, that was a nugget, a gold nugget or a bomb, however you want to describe it. I really, because I've had actually a hard time with the word legacy.
Mm,
But that explanation or perspective makes it a lot more digestible.
yeah.
And there's a lot of power in that, in
Yeah.
terms of like, wow, look at what we're doing. Like there's bigger ramifications, and they can be positive or they could be negative. Which way do I
Right.
want to go?
Right. Yeah. That's I hadn't thought about it the way you're saying it, and when somebody framed it for me, it actually gave me permission. And what you were watching, you as my friend and colleague, and what people who watch the show are watching, is you're watching a man um, um, create his legacy, prepare to leave his legacy.
Mm-hmm.
You know,
Mm-hmm.
which I think is maybe the longest game of a vision.
Mm-hmm. It's interesting. I want to add this. You were talking about the responses, how, some of the responses have floored you.
Yeah.
I've actually had somebody reach out because I've been documenting my journey of starting my life over and ending my business and ending my last career, 15 years. And I've been putting up these videos on YouTube. And actually, I forget where she was from, but someone hit me up in the comment section and was actually really into your work.
Hmm.
And she saw one of the things that I posted was talking about my experience of, working at the ZEN DOG and
Hmm.
my transition. And it was just amazing what she was looking to do. And I just simply said, it would be beautiful if you just reached out to ZEN DOG, let them know where you're coming from and what you're looking to do, and see if there's a good match or a good fit between you
Mm-hmm.
and them.
Oh,
But even
cool.
that, I
Right.
mean, the effect you've had, this person didn't know me, doesn't know, what I'm doing on YouTube, but they just saw something that said ZEN DOG, tuned into it, and then was like, oh my God, I want to go work there. I want
Yeah.
to be able to learn, what was that like? And I got some questions asking, what was that experience
Interesting.
like? And what was your perspective? And it was just really a great interaction. And I
Huh.
could tell, just based on that relationship or that interaction, the profound effect that you've had on other people's lives.
Thanks for telling me that. When we were working together, it was I had to observe certain protocols in terms of equanimity, in the culture. But what people didn't know, and I'd said this to you before, and once when I was on the street working a session with somebody, and you passed by, and I said, that guy is the reason why I'm able to do this, because
Mm,
of your mindfulness and what you taught me with
mm,
your skill. Um, and you were my secret weapon.
mm.
I mean,
Mhm.
I was really out about you, so it wasn't a secret. But
Yeah.
it's interesting because if people dig what I'm doing, what they don't know is that what I'm doing wouldn't be possible. I wouldn't have been able to arch this way if it weren't for what you had given to me.
Mm, mm, mhm. Thank you.
Yeah.
Beautiful. That was always my hope, I know it's so important for us to take care of ourselves,
Hmm.
especially if we're in the position of being givers, because it's very easy when we enjoy that to get lost in the service. And sometimes we neglect ourselves,
Yeah.
and that was part of my mission, was to really help people take care of themselves so they could have a greater impact in the world.
Yeah.
So thank you for sharing that.
Mm.
Let's move into why did you decide to start your own business and build the ZEN DOG, a day play and boarding facility for dogs that have been kicked out of or that aren't allowed to board at other facilities in the city?
I decided to start my own business. Um, I appreciate the way you laid out the question, because when I decided to start the business, I didn't have the kind of clarity that you just identified. I decided to
Mm-hmm.
start my own business because it just seemed like the best option for what was possible with what I was doing. I actually did go I did go apply to people who are now competitors, and I don't mean that in a negative way.
Mm-hmm.
I did apply, and I'd go into interviews and I'd say, I want to learn everything from you and then open my own business in a year. And I don't know why I didn't get called back.
Wow. Yeah. Yeah.
you know,
That
uh,
could definitely hinder the process.
yeah, that's probably it on the list of things not to say in the interview.
Yeah.
So it just, like, whether I understood it was a vision or I wanted to keep, working in, in the laboratory, so to speak. Um, So I knew I needed to start my own business. And thankfully, I got a lot of support around that, because that was terrifying. Prosperity is terrifying, the terror of prosperity. It's,
Mm-hmm.
I know that I'm wired different than a lot of people, same as some, different than others. Um, but there's a difference between being successful and famous and rich and wealthy and being prosperous. And prosperous to me is inherently spiritual, and there's a lot of space around it. And so for me to be prosperous requires, for me to experience prosperity, requires that I am humble, open, considerate, transparent. I'm in relationship. I'm in integrity. There's a lot about receiving, because prosperity, in order to experience prosperity, one has to be able to receive, which
Mm-hmm.
is different than taking and different than getting.
Yeah.
It's receiving. And so it's inherently vulnerable and humbling. So this rise of the Zen Dog, and the show obviously was another rocket level of that. It was in the face of the terror of prosperity. You know, so
Mm-hmm.
as things grew, it became clear that we had a lot of dogs at our house, and we needed
Mm-hmm.
to go somewhere else. And I had the conversation with a client, and I'll never forget it. And she said, I would be willing to co-sign on a lease if you wanted to open up a place, which floored me because I didn't ask her for anything. That wasn't my way. Now I
Mm-hmm.
ask a lot, probably a lot less than maybe I could, but I ask a lot more. I ask for help a
Mm-hmm.
lot more than I ever did. She ended up becoming a backer. She's an investor in the company, and like one thing rolled after another. And so it just became the next logical step,
Mm-hmm.
opening a facility. And I didn't know squat about business, terrible business
Mm-hmm.
practices, terrible practices with money, didn't know how to remain solvent or be self-supporting really at its core. And I don't mean terrible as a judgment. Like it just, I hope that my son, who's almost 4 and our daughter's almost 8 months old, I hope that they get the better of what I've learned.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. I think
So,
it's a way bigger undertaking than it
oh
looks
man,
like from the
oh my
outside,
gosh,
you know.
oh man,
Based
like
on my experience, it's one thing to open a business, and it's a whole
right,
nother thing to run a business, and
right.
then it's a whole nother thing to scale a business.
Yeah, and necessary to scale it is staff, and managing people was not a skill I had. I was good with people in certain ways and to a certain extent. Certainly,
Mm,
my recovery gave me a lot of those skills, or they took the turd off of those skills and they made them useful.
yeah.
Um, but that's something that I'm still like I'm not sure. I know that I am excellent with aggressive dogs.
Mm-hmm.
Um, I don't know that I'm excellent with managing people.
Mm-hmm.
I think I'm good, and I continue to get better at it, but like it's still a spot where
Mm,
I feel I need a lot of growth. So that line that you're talking about, that's a real challenge. And then I didn't know to know about what taxes had to be paid, and what
dude.
what I mean? What were the things, like what were the licenses? And I found out like a couple years in, when I found out that I owed a high 5-figure number to
Yep.
a lot of different people, not because I was trying to be dodgy, but because I was vague,
Yeah.
you know?
Yeah.
So carrying that, the concrete responsibility, and coupling that with the vision and not letting it compete with the vision, that has been a hero's journey, actually.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and oddly enough, with the COVID lockdown, we're not in a position to be able to reopen the facility to the public yet. And yet, I got the email literally this morning from the producers of the show saying Disney has greenlit, and Nat Geo Wild has greenlit, and we're going to start filming season 2.
Wow.
So the jump from our living room to a capacity 70 dog facility, to
Mm-hmm.
that facility closing down, to we're going to go to season 2 and we're going to scale up globally, like that's radical.
Wow. Yeah. Yeah,
But
that
it
was
doesn't
that was pretty
happen
much
if
the
people don't
last thing I
fall into place.
saw
Yeah,
taking place was you were getting ready for season 2.
right, right. Yeah, we filmed like 10 days and then shut down. So
Then.
I've learned so much, and it's one of the areas where I want to give back to, uh, because that's hard stuff to learn,
Mm-hmm.
and I've been getting my degree in business.
Dude. Yeah, you wanna get in there, just go open a business and there's plenty to learn.
Yeah,
Mm-hmm.
yeah,
Yeah, I'm floored by it still today. I mean, that's why I've created this podcast, because these are the kinds of conversations I want to have. I want to talk to other business owners. I want to talk to people who think in ways that I haven't thought yet.
yeah,
I really want to be a sponge and hear
yeah,
this hero's journey. It's so compelling to me. Like, I want to hear the good, the bad, and the ugly. I want to hear it
yeah,
all: the ups,
yeah,
the downs, the failures, the the triumphs. I want to hear it all, because when people share their story, the impact that it has on my life is wild. You know, it unlocks and changes my brain, and I'm able to do things and think in ways I've never thought and never been able to perform. So it's just a reason that's really got me compelled to do this, what we're doing right now. I want to dig into, can you explain the type of dogs that you help? And we're going to keep going back and forth between the dogs and business and all this, and elaborate on this statement that I found of yours that I really liked. It's, I work with dogs that other people won't work with because I see myself in them. And every day it gives me hope.
Okay. So I arrived at a place where I was about as close to hopeless, I think, as I'd ever been. My younger brother had died on a motorcycle. I didn't know that I was really heavy. I was heavy into my drinking and drug use. Hit it really well because I could polish a turd with the best of them. So, I mean, I remember when I got sober, the only one person said to me, "I thought you might have a problem." And it turned out that he thought that because he was my roommate, which wasn't the clue for him, but he would bartend and I would swap drinks so frequently in the course of a night trying to catch that buzz, right?
Oh, yeah.
So I arrived pretty hopeless. My brother died on a motorcycle and I inherited his car. And in a blackout one night, I hit a couple on their motorcycle.
Dang.
And that was it. And I pulled over and waited for the cops. I could have left. There were no witnesses, and I pulled over and I waited for the cops. So to go from that to facing a fear out of necessity, facing a fear of dogs, to being able to see and understand and actually have the science that supports that 90% of aggression is fear-based, and to see the parallels, hopefully not from a place where I am being a narcissist, but actually see the parallels as a means of motivating me to help them and as a way of me being even more compassionate and open-minded towards them. I found myself in this grossly underserved niche of dogs that have aggression issues that don't get helped. And pretty quickly on, I was helping some really dangerous dogs. And so as we tapped that, now I'll give your listeners context for it. So we work off of a bite level chart. There are two widely recognized bite level charts. We refer to Dr. Dunbar's, which is 1 through 6. Bite level 1 is dog growls, lunges, shows teeth, but never actually do the teeth touch the skin. Bite level 2, teeth touch skin. It's usually an abrasion. Bite level 3 is an actual puncture. Bite level 4, it's a puncture that bite level 3 technically is a puncture that goes up to half the length of the tooth. Bite level 4 is a puncture that can go up to 1.5 times the length of the tooth. They're very different in nature often and in intent. Bite level 5 is multiple bite level 4s, and bite level 6 is death. So I have worked with dogs that have killed other dogs and been able to help in their rehabilitation. I worked with, probably at least 50% of the dogs that came in were bite level, 80% were bite level 2 or above. 30 to 40% were bite level 3 or above. So as we got into that niche, and I saw that I almost said the people that needed help most. I saw that the dogs that needed help most were the ones that were least likely to get it. And that is, we could certainly take a step back and see what's happening with where we're at culturally and socially. And, I won't go off that jam too far, but I'll give you an example that, in LA, it's my understanding that Black male pit mixes are the most likely to be put down.
So not a great alternative.
Not a great alternative.
If they don't find rehabilitation or
if they don't find appropriate rehabilitation. If they get rehabilitation and they go somewhere where they get a shock collar put on them and they get beaten to submission and, hey, they don't act bad anymore and we save their life. And, there's a whole other thing about that is its own question. I just saw what they were up against, and it reminded me a lot of what I felt I was up against. And I was able to stay open to them sometimes more than I was open to myself, and vice versa, So I kept seeing, again, I want to, because I know my ego can really take me in the wrong direction. I want to be careful about the possibility of being narcissistic. What I know is that there was so much that I could relate to, that I felt deeply empathic to and compassionate about in a
Mm-hmm.
dog,
Mm-hmm.
over and over and over again. And I haven't become numb to it so much as it's become, their reality has become normalized, and the possibility of their transformation has become normalized, you
Mm-hmm.
know?
Mm-hmm.
So there's very little that surprises me anymore in that world. And I will say, I don't open the emails or open the Instagrams that say sensitive content where, horrific things are happening to dogs. I work on the rehabilitation end of that,
Mm-hmm.
but I don't need to see that stuff. I don't
Mm-hmm.
need to see the vision of it. I don't need those images in my head. I have to be mindful. I learned that along the way, but I have to be mindful about what I let in, because it can't distract me from what I'm supposed to do for this dog,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
which sometimes feels cold, but it's self-preservation.
Absolutely. Yeah, that could only make the job way more challenging, walking in with all that in your mind.
Yeah.
One of the most profound things I observed working at the Zen Dog, which was the ability that I saw in you to select other dogs to help dogs make better decisions for themselves and learn new social behaviors. And a quote that I wanted to reference in this observation was, "We know at the Zen Yard that dogs help other dogs come out of their shell, face their fears, and get past their aggression." And I got to see that firsthand. And I've never really seen anything like that before. Could you expand on that?
Yeah, that was born out of necessity, because I started to get these dogs back in our house, Brooklyn and I did, that were problematic. They weren't problematic. The behavior was problematic, and they had challenges. And I had, I guess at the time, 2, 3, 4, maybe 5 of my own, 5 of our own, and
Mm-hmm.
I needed help. And humans can't dog socialize dogs. Dogs dog socialize dogs. But humans
Mm-hmm.
can help a dog socialize a dog, you know?
Mm-hmm.
So I saw very quickly in my own home that the dogs were able to do what I couldn't do, as they should, and I could help the dogs do what they were in need of being able to do. And
Mm-hmm.
that's how that, was symbiotic, I suppose. And that's kind of how that was born. And I would never go back.
Mm-hmm.
Even now as I'm working virtually, I did a virtual session. I did a virtual socialization session. I wasn't there. I didn't know the other dog,
Mm-hmm.
but I said to the woman that I was working with, here's the kind of dog that we need to be able to help your dog with this particular issue. And she said, my neighbor has that dog. And sure
Mm-hmm.
enough, we ran it just like I was in the yard at the Zen Dog. We ran it, virtually, and it worked.
Wow, that's
Yeah,
awesome.
it was really radical. So I think as that started to happen, and I made a lot of mistakes. I got bit. Dogs, fortunately, there rarely did dogs get bit, but there were a handful of bites that I took, and that other people took along the way, and some of that was just being ignorant. A lot of that on my part, and didn't have safe setups and things like that. Rarely did dogs hurt. Did they get hurt? But they did get hurt. Mine more
Mm-hmm.
than any. And that hasn't happened for years now, thankfully,
Mm-hmm.
because I don't think it's cool anymore.
Mm-hmm.
I don't chalk that up to, hey, that's just part of the deal. I mean, if I took a scar, I would look at it that way. Hey, it's a battle wound. But if a dog
Mm-hmm.
took a scar, it would really hurt my heart.
Mm-hmm.
So all of that is out of the window. It's a radical thing to watch a dog be of service. It
Yeah.
is. It is. It's like watching glory at its finest. You know.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I like what you said, that humans, we can't force a dog to learn how to behave socially, but yet a dog can teach a dog to do that.
Yep.
Because a lot of the problems, I mean, this is just based on a little bit that I've been able to see and observe, that a lot of the issues are social behavior issues.
Yeah. Correct. it's profound. As I continue to explore dog socialization and listen from the people in the highest levels in the field, across the board, dog socialization has been determined to be able to unlock a whole world of desired behaviors.
Mm.
So just dog socialization can actually teach dogs how to pick up cues that will help them human socialize.
Mm.
I mean, think about it from a species standpoint. If I got really good at human socialization, which on some days is arguable, but if that's part of my journey, is getting better with people, and
Mm-hmm.
getting better with people has put me in touch with what's around me and animals, let's say, in ways that I hadn't thought before.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So it's really something to watch them work. I don't know that I told you this, so I'm sorry to spring this live, but Pierre passed away 2 weeks ago.
Oh, wow. No
Yeah.
way.
And
Wow.
he was sick, and then he was, the doctor thought it was cancer. Two
Mm-hmm.
separate doctors thought that the first one didn't rule out cancer, and the second one thought that that's likely what it was. And it went fast, but he ended up, I documented it. I'm going to make a documentary of his passing, because I knew I had an incredible opportunity to record everything that was happening over his
Mm.
last several weeks. And he ended up
Mm.
dying in a hole that he had dug under a tree in our backyard, where he had been laying more frequently for the last several weeks. And he passed with me right there next to him. And it was just stunning.
Wow.
And so, to your point about the dogs, like, I know who my crew is, and I know what my dogs can do. And Pierre was something special in his way that we see on Dog Impossible.
Mm-hmm.
And that you got to see, and anybody that got to spend time at the Zen Dog,
Mm-hmm.
they saw that. And Pierre helped dogs that, according to their owners, had never been able to be helped.
Mm-hmm.
And I can't replace that.
Yeah.
And I know that my crew is going to have to evolve.
Mm-hmm.
I've got 4 dogs left, and they're all seniors,
Mm-hmm.
between 6 and my oldest, Renge, is 15 and a half years old.
Dang.
Right?
Yeah. Well,
So
you have a lot of collective wisdom
a lot of wisdom there.
within the group.
Yeah. Yeah. And,
Mm-hmm.
and soon I got to check with Brooklyn, because with 2 kids, I'm capped.
Mm-hmm.
But soon I know that there will be dogs that need to come in, like Nama.
Mm-hmm.
Nama is a social genius who was
Mm-hmm.
labeled as dog aggressive when she came to us, when we got her from the shelter.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and she's a genius,
Yeah.
in socialization. And I'm already thinking, when does the puppy come along that Nama can help?
Mm.
I'm thinking about Nama's generativity.
Puppy on deck.
Yeah. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So I was fortunate to go on a couple house calls with you as well.
Yeah.
And if I was to describe those experiences in one word, I'd have to use the word miraculous. You mentioned the word miracle earlier, and I
Yeah.
saw miracles take place. Can you describe what it is that you do on your house calls? Because I witnessed the dog owners go from desperation and a feeling of hopelessness to feeling empowered and hopeful.
Yeah. It's the,
Because it's like not only the dogs were being helped,
yeah.
but the humans
Yeah.
were being helped. And I would just like to add to that on a major level.
Yeah. Deep. Yeah. As
Mm-hmm.
deep as they want to go.
Mm-hmm.
Um, yeah. There is, going into season 2, one of the things that we all agreed at a production level is that we wanted to expand and explore more of the human transformation, because that's my life is transformed because I got to help Kingston.
Yeah.
That's the blueprint.
Yeah.
So what I've been able to do is help make that possible through really simple, practical techniques in the home. And I look at 5 things. I look at the relationship. I guess if I'm going to create a window, I'm a relationship-based trainer. Because I'm not relying on anything. What happens if you don't have anything other than yourself? You've got to be able to help the dog.
Mm-hmm.
So if it's a relationship, I look at what happens in the day-to-day living. And the 5 areas where we are most regularly or frequently engaging with our dogs are around the front door, with the walk, with the feeding, with the affection, and where they sleep, which is 99.8% of the time 99.9% of the time in the human's bed. So
Mm-hmm.
I look at what's happening in the day-to-day living, because it doesn't matter what you tell me in life, it matters what you do.
Mm-hmm.
Ultimately, that's what I'm looking at. And for a dog, you can't, you can confuse a dog, but it's pretty hard to BS a dog, you know?
Mm-hmm.
Um, you can trick a dog, but I think ultimately maybe it's hard to lie to a dog. So the dog sees how things work in the home. And because I look at it that way, and honestly, because I've been given just tremendous insight from profound women and men in my life, in and out of recovery and in my spiritual path, I have the opportunity to look at things from a place where I don't judge you. I can relate, and I know how to help you. If you want to do something better, I know how to help you. I can say that, categorically. I can say that. So I'm able to come in and get the rundown on the dog and say, I get it, me too, I get it, me too. And in that relating, the human starts to feel heard, which is usually a big part of the trap. A lot of people I work with, I'm the last chance, or the third or
Mm-hmm.
fourth or fifth trainer that they've worked with. And it's no knock on the trainers that have gone before or the methods. The feedback that I get from them is, I couldn't stick with it, or I felt stupid, or I didn't like what the trainer was doing. So
Mm-hmm.
nowhere in their experience did they feel empowered, or partnered with, or included in, you know.
Mm-hmm.
And I just made it really. I remember Dr. Dunbar saying once at a seminar, "Pete, nobody wants to hear about our science," he said. And don't get me wrong, anybody. I'm not naysaying the science at all, because it's going to be the basis of everything ultimately. What I am saying is that he says nobody wants to hear our science. They want to know how they can change their dogs in 3 steps. He said, you
Mm-hmm.
have to make this, he said to the room, you have to make this as accessible as possible.
Yeah.
And so I took that in even further and ran with it.
Mm-hmm.
And it's radical what people are open to. And at this point, even before the show, by the time you ask for help with a Zen Dog session, enough people know, because of the world of the exposure to training, enough people know to say, well, I know it's really me and not my dog. Well, yes, and
Mm-hmm.
both those things can be true. And also, they know by contacting us specifically that there's a way that we go about things that is about cultivating right relationships
Mm-hmm.
between me and the clients, between me and the competition, between the dogs. All of this has to be in the practice of right relationship, and integrity and in service.
Mm-hmm.
Uh,
What does a codependent relationship look like with dog owners and dogs?
well, in my human terms, it's not a clinical term for sure, but in my
Mm-hmm.
human term, what it looks like is the dog needs the human in order to feel better, or manage its own stress, or
Mm-hmm.
not be afraid. The dog needs the human to do that, and the human needs the dog to need it. And
Mm-hmm.
we're talking about like a really, I may get hammered on this, but I'll stand by it. We're talking about a gross misuse of emotional support.
Mm-hmm.
We're talking about a perverse turn in the nature of the relationship. Um,
Would you
Humans have
say it's
been.
an unhealthy dependency and it's a
Yeah,
relationship built on neediness?
correct. I'd say those things. Yep.
Okay.
And what's interesting about that is the relationship built on neediness doesn't actually meet needs.
Mm-hmm.
The relationship built on neediness is want based. I
Mm-hmm.
want this so that I feel better. I want this so that I mean, a lot of people can relate to this. I'm embarrassed by how my dog acts. Well, it's got nothing to do with you,
Mm-hmm.
or I got a running joke with people when I say, "Oh, when I genuinely say your dog is really beautiful," and they say, "Thank you. You didn't give birth to that dog. That's got
Mm-hmm.
nothing. Your dog's beauty has nothing to do with you." You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
So those attachments that we make that are just really common and socially acceptable, those are harbingers of, I need my dog to behave a certain way so that it does blank for me.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't find that to be a healthy or productive relationship. And they're just so profound. They're sentient beings, and we're still coming to understand what they can do.
Mm-hmm.
Your viewers and listeners should check this out. It's on Instagram. I don't know if I told you this, Cody. There's a speech therapist who's got a dog named Stella. Her page is Hunger for Words. Hunger, the number 4 in words. And
Mm-hmm.
she created a board with buttons that at each button would have a word that was recorded. And so Stella has learned how to speak by touching the buttons on this board. She's learned how to
Wow.
speak human English.
Mm.
It is mind
Wow.
blowing.
That is.
And this she's not a dog trainer. I mean, she could do whatever she wants to now.
Yeah.
She's so far ahead, but she's a speech therapist, and she thought, I'll try this with my dog.
Mm-hmm.
So what they're capable of, we still barely know, but we do know, what we do know is quite profound. And so to treat it any other way really sells both of us short.
Mm-hmm. So in terms of a dog pack, like how does the ranking work? Because I know you mentioned like some old myths and ideas as far as how to work with dogs and understanding it from a more alpha dominance perspective, but how does the ranking system work within the pack, and how can we as humans work with that?
It is. Thank you for asking. So that the dog's social structure is much more fluid than the wolf structure, which is where we get the idea that the wolf is this, and there's the alpha, and you toe the line, and that kind of stuff. And even there's a lot more information around that, that allows for a lot more space in the understanding of it. But the dog's social structure is much more fluid. So I asked somebody recently about this, how are we using certain language, and what does it mean? And then he was saying dominance. Mike Shikasha was saying dominance is we shouldn't throw the word away, even though it's a loaded word. Dominance, dogs can exhibit dominant behavior because they're trying to protect something or keep somebody away from something, which is kind of the same thing. Often a lot of the aggression we see is about making space. I act you, I go at you, I bark or lunge at you, or I bite you, the dominant behaviors. And they may be likely driven by fear, and I'm trying to create space. So that is an easier word to work with, even though it's still pretty loaded. I don't think of it the way that I used to in terms of high and middle and low ranking per se. I'm looking at it much more site specific. What I do know is that Dr. Dunbar said that a middle ranking teenage female dog is 10 times more likely to be aggressive than an alpha male dog. Now, I heard that years ago, and I'd have to see if he would change the language around that or reframe it. But it does say to me that some dogs seem to be predisposed to certain kind of dynamics. We see that. But you take somebody like Nama, who can easily be the only secure dog in the yard, but she will be very deferential in her behavior, head down, eyes away. She'll be very deferential so as to not engage and ultimately, I'm putting this in human terms, upset or trigger or offend or scare the other dog. It doesn't look like that doesn't look like behavior, high ranking or secure or dominant behavior from Nama, and that wouldn't necessarily qualify as that, but she is clearly the adult in the room. You know what I mean? It reminds me of a I forget his name, but martial arts master who told a story about being at a restaurant. He was with his student, and he was at a restaurant. I think it's in Philly. I don't know why everything challenging sometimes seems to happen in Philly. But the story was that he was with his student, and some people came in and judged him for his race, and were giving him a hard time and asked him to move because that was their table. So he moved, and then they did it again, and he moved, and they did it again, and then he moved one more time, and then he realized that it was best that he leave. And his student said, basically, you could have kicked all their asses. Why did you do that? And he said, because they were afraid.
Wow. Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. Oh yeah. That's big.
Yeah.
Another bomb. Boom. I don't know. You could probably go deep on this question, but let's just address it. To sleep in the bed or not to sleep in the bed?
So I'll share my experience because that's probably better than anything.
Okay.
I don't really know. I'd love it if somebody could actually provide data, like hard scientific data about what does and doesn't work.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm sure maybe I'd be great if I get a flood of that from anybody. But
Mm-hmm.
I want a lot of context for it. So what I know is in this relationship-based approach, when I look at dogs being in the bed, dogs are in the bed because we want them in the bed. It's
Mm-hmm.
awesome. Brooklyn and I had 3 of our dogs in the bed. So what I found and have since seen with thousands of dogs empirically is what I found when Brooklyn and I decided to get our dogs out of the bed, they began to regard us differently. That's the best way I can say it. Like I
Mm-hmm.
saw that they listened to me differently. It's also when I began to practice more detachment and not be needy in my own way emotionally as much.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and so I saw them start to regard us, listen differently, look at us differently. And so what I've seen since is there's something about the way that we work in this relationship-based training that if a dog is sleeping in the bed, which no joke, out of the maybe 4,000 that I've met since Brooklyn and I got the dogs out, maybe less than 50 dogs have I met that aren't in the bed. So that's how common it is.
Mm-hmm.
There's something about that in the through line of our relationship with dogs that if they are in the bed and then we're asking these other things of them or changing these other aspects of the dynamic in the day-to-day living, there's an incongruency and an inconsistency which seems to inhibit the sustainability of the change that's possible.
Mm-hmm.
That's just what I see. And it's
Mm-hmm.
actually textbook. If you have a dog and we work together and then you call me in 3 months and say it was great and then something happened, I will probably, one of my first 5 questions will be, is your dog back in the bed? And 90% of the time the answer is yes.
Can I share on that real quick?
Please. Yeah.
Literally last week. So our dogs don't sleep in our bed. We have 3 of them. They're all
Right.
rescues, and they come from whatever world they come from. They have all gotten along. 2 of our dogs do have BL6
Mm-hmm.
due to taking out one of the other little dogs that we used to have, and it passed.
Yeah.
But with these 3 dogs that we have, the 2 bigger dogs and the little one, they've never had an incident with each other until last week. Also, the only change, there's 2 changes. One is a lot of fireworks because it's almost 4th of
Yeah.
July.
Yep.
And my gut on that is there's definitely been a shift in how the dogs just day to day behave just around the house and with us, how they interact with the human, because they're always kind of walking behind us now
Yeah.
out of fear. I would qualify that as fear. And literally, I was sitting down doing my little morning ritual, coffee, writing, reading, all that. And the little dog we just let come back into the bedroom, not sleep in the bed, but the other 2 dogs have been sleeping out in the living room area where they sleep, or the kitchen actually, where they all usually sleep. But because the fireworks, and she's been totally freaked out, my girlfriend was like, yo, just let her come in and sleep in the bedroom. So it wasn't even the bed, but just the
Right.
bedroom. And literally within, let's say, 3 nights of that, 4 nights of that, that morning, 3 or 4 nights later, the next morning, I'm sitting there and I hear this little kind of growl. And then I hear a big ass growl. And they were both behind me, and the little dog was laying on the big bed, and they usually share that together. At least 2 of the dogs share that together. And when I turned around, the big dog was literally on top of, with her mouth around the little girl's
Yeah.
neck, and on top of her, loud as all get out. And I've never seen that behavior before.
Yeah.
And I get her off. So that was, BL1. There was no puncture. There was no intent to take it further. And by the time I get that dog off, which is a pity Catahoula mix, the shepherd, our other big dog, shepherd, comes in and does the exact same thing right on top of the neck of the little dog as well. Just roar, hackles up and all of that. And I got to pull that dog off. It wasn't like I had to really pull or pry. It was, I had to get the dog off so it didn't escalate, in my opinion. But the only difference was the fireworks and letting the little dog come back in. And my take on that was, she doesn't growl saying, yo, this is my bed. Usually, like, I've never seen that happen, but my sense was she was like a little snooty and a little like princess, like I'm the queen.
Yeah.
And the big dog wasn't having it.
Right.
So to speak to the
Right.
topic of discussion was the bed or no bed. It was just a bedroom, and it
Right.
altered our little dog's behavior. And our bigger dog felt it necessary to say, yo, that's not how we're doing things, because she's definitely the lead.
Yeah. What a trip. What a
Mm-hmm.
trip. I want to say too, for you, for context, that it's helpful, and for any of the viewers and listeners, that there are two other things that are very serious that are at play here. One is that the social impact of the lockdown.
Mm.
There is a huge uptick in dog violence in homes.
Wow. Okay.
The second thing is the impact of the social unrest.
Mm.
So we cannot, as sentient beings, we cannot discount that. It's really hard to quantify, but that's
Mm-hmm.
the feedback that we keep getting. It
Mm-hmm.
happened, I hadn't told you this, but within a week of closing down our facility, I hear that really wicked sound of a dogfight happening, and I look out the window and I see that Renge is being attacked by Pierre and Deja,
Mm.
and ends up getting punctured pretty seriously under the eye. My dogs have not fought in my home for years. Like, I'd
Wow.
really have to think about, how many years it's been. But what had
Mm-hmm.
changed was the lockdown. I was home. I brought two fosters who were living in the back house. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
There was a disturbance in the force,
Yeah.
and
Mm-hmm.
and they were going to take it upon themselves to settle it, and I wasn't hip to it, and that was quite a wake up call.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, yeah,
So do you
so
have 2 more minutes? You got to be out
yeah,
at 50 after, right?
yeah,
Okay. I mean, there's a million other questions. Like, I'm crazy when I go to Question Town,
awesome.
getting ready for these interviews. I want to definitely get into this really quick. I mean, we're
Yeah,
gonna have to do a part two, it looks
yeah,
like. But back to you and a little bit of the business stuff is, what have been some of the biggest struggles? This is kind of a big question, so hopefully it doesn't take
yeah.
us too far. But what have been some of the biggest struggles or challenges that you've had to face on your business journey, including things like fears, false beliefs, or failures that
Mhm.
you've overcome?
Some of the biggest challenges that I've had to face on my journey as a business owner, for me, vagueness is the fog of fear.
Mm,
And so I now see that most of what I didn't know, I didn't know, or I was afraid to say I didn't know, or I didn't know how to learn. Like, but it's some combination of, I don't want to touch that. Like, I'm the guy that used to, my friends were great dancers, and I was great. Like, if I could learn something, so I would copy it, take it home, practice it for weeks, and then bust it out on the dance floor, but not tell anybody I had practiced that. Didn't want you to know that I didn't know how to do that, or that I had to put the work in,
mm-hmm, mm-hmm,
a real turd shiner. So what
mm-hmm,
happened is, in the process, I had to come up against that, because if I didn't address what I didn't know, I was going to lose my business. And
mm-hmm,
if I didn't address what I didn't know, the last time I ended up almost dead, like 2 hours shy of death from a dog bite, about 6 years ago, 6, 7 years ago. If I didn't address what I didn't know, I was literally putting my life in danger and the lives of others.
mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Okay, thank you for sharing. So we got 60 seconds. Where can our listeners find you?
You can find us, you can visit the zendog.com. We've got a plethora of videos and information that are available. You can certainly check us out on Dog Impossible, which is the hub station for that is Nat Geo Wild. You can see us on Hulu Live and Disney Plus. This is not a plug for Verizon, but it so happens if
Mm-hmm,
you're a Verizon subscriber, you can get Disney Plus, I think, for free for another several months. So that's another way in.
mm-hmm.
Instagram is where I'm most busy. We're on Facebook as the Zen Dog. We are on Instagram as the Zen Dog LA, and we're out there. I love engaging with people. We do a lot of live Q&As, and just the community that's building is really tremendous.
So I want to thank you for taking the time out of your day to share your journey with us. Like I said, there will be a part two. I got another 20 questions.
Yeah, great.
And I also want to thank you for being a positive role model inside and outside of your business. I look forward to doing this again, and I have really enjoyed connecting with you today.
Yeah, likewise, from start to now. Thanks so much, Cody. A lot of respect and trust and love for you. Thank you.
And that's a wrap. Thanks for tuning in. If you enjoyed the show, you can subscribe, like, and leave a review. Your support is greatly appreciated. Welcome to the Vision Hunters tribe.